Use the teleport button to move forward into the chapel. Depending on your controller configuration, you can adjust the direction you'll be facing when you teleport, as shown by the arrow on the floor. Feel free to move around during your tour to get a better vantage point. Go ahead and try this now. We will begin shortly. You are standing in a virtual recreation of the Sistine Chapel. You have just walked through the entrance and are experiencing the work as the artist intended. This is how it was first seen by the people of Rome in December 1512. In our time, roughly 20,000 tourists a day are herded through this room, entering from a small door on the altar wall and exiting through a side door that will be installed in the 19th century. It is overwhelming. The mind reels. It's hard to focus on any one thing as you crane your neck and succumb to sensory visual overload. It was the German poet Goethe who said, "Until you have seen the Sistine Chapel, you can have no adequate conception of what one man is capable of accomplishing." Above you is over 6,000 square feet of painted fresco, largely created by one man. A man who didn't even want this job. Michelangelo Buonarroti, at age 33, was considered the greatest living sculptor after his creation of statues like the Pietà and the David. Some considered him the greatest living artist, period. One of these admirers was Pope Julius II. His uncle, Sixtus, had built this very chapel that bears his name when he was pope. At the time, the ceiling above you was covered in bright blue ultramarine paint with thousands of small gold stars. Pope Julius decided that he would add to his uncle's chapel and decorate its ceiling. He convened his Vatican artists to devise a plan. The artists, namely Donato Bramante, realized that this was going to be an extremely difficult task. He told Julius that he should award the ceiling commission to Michelangelo, the young sculptor from Florence. If he was indeed the greatest artist of our time, he would have no problem completing this commission. Unfortunately for Michelangelo, but fortunately for us, the Pope was convinced. All Bramante and his artist friends had to do was sit back and watch Michelangelo fail. Michelangelo pleaded with the Pope. He was a sculptor, not a painter. He had no experience painting fresco, but the Pope didn't care. So Michelangelo fled Rome, and the Pope sent an envoy to hunt him down and bring him back. When he refused, the ambassador said he would either decorate the Pope's ceiling or risk the invasion of Florence, his hometown. Needless to say, back then you didn't say no to the Pope. The ceiling above you took 4 years to complete, from 1508 to 1512. This includes a brief meltdown in the middle where he again fled and again was brought back under guard by armed papal soldiers. During this time, Michelangelo painted the entire ceiling you see, everything from the top of the windows up. Let me remind you, it took Leonardo 6 years to complete this, which I'm placing here at actual size. Seriously. Michelangelo was originally commissioned to paint the 12 apostles over the windows, and some elaborate geometric designs above their heads filling the vault. This was a Herculean task, not just painting a huge curved vault 70 feet off the ground, but dealing with ever-changing sight lines that, from the floor, presented almost impossible problems of perspective and foreshortening. Michelangelo was not one to be intimidated by difficulties. He preferred them, sought them out, at times even created them. He told the Pope that the existing plan was boring, and he would come up with something new. If he was going to do something, he was going to own it. So here's this young guy who doesn't want the job, who isn't trained to do the job, but reluctantly accepts the commission and then decides to completely alter it to an unheard of level of ambition never before seen, not even in antiquity. So Michelangelo decides that the chapel, as it exists now, with its Quattrocento frescoes on the walls depicting the lives of Moses and Christ, what is missing is everything that came before. He will literally paint biblical Genesis, surrounded by the Old Testament prophets and pagan Greek symbols who foretold the coming of Christ. In the four corners, he will depict Old Testament Jewish heroes overcoming their enemies. He painted over 300 figures encased in this fictional painted architectural scheme, the first of its kind, that serves to unify and harmonize everything into a single coherent cosmic whole. Unsure of himself, Michelangelo had assembled a team of experts to help him. He started right above where you entered the chapel, painting the Great Flood and the